February the 23rd, 2005, interviewing Mervyn Brown about his experiences in World War II in New Guinea. Mervyn, I believe you were a hairdresser barber in Bialaba at the outbreak of the war.
Yes, I was.
What led you to join the 39th?
Well, that's a question that's always tricked me too, because I never ever heard of the 39th. And I was in the 38th up at Seymour Road. And I did training up there, and then they let us go out of camp after a period of time, and then I got noticed that I was in the 39th, just out of the blue. And I got a notice to be at Spencer Street Station at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I got there was nobody there, but a trainload turned up a bit later on, and that was my initiation of the 39th Battalion.
And then it was out to Bacchus Marsh, was it?
Yeah, out to Darley.
How did you find Darley? Was it a useful time for you?
Well, Darley was, yes, it was. Well, we did route marches and we did all sorts of things out there, and did a bit of training and that. I'd done a fair bit of training with the 38th actually. You know how they have the bull ring, and initially you go around and they have this bull ring, as they call it, and here you would do machine guns, and here you would do map reading, and the next one group you'd be bayonet practice, things like this. Well, I'd gone through all that with the 38th, so I had a little bit of training, but I must say when I first started I didn't know my left foot from my right.
Were you a volunteer?
No, I wasn't.
Yeah.
And a mate of mine came from Bialaba too, and both we were the only two, and his number follows mine, his regimental number followed mine. And we were the only two that came from Bialaba and went into the 39. So that was, he was an Italian extraction actually, Albert Baruta, and he was wounded in Hattie's village and evacuated back to Australia. But yeah, we were the only two. Yeah.
How did you feel at Darley when you got marching orders? Was it excitement or just a job to be done?
No, I don't think there was any excitement. I think I was a bit peeved at having to get up so damn early.
What was the trip like up to Sydney?
Crowded, yeah, crowded, and they stopped and had meals here and there. I think we had a meal in Spencer Street, and I think we had another one on the way up. We had one at Moss Vale, I think, from memory.
Had you been to Sydney before?
No.
What was the harbour like? Was it exciting to you?
No, I think we were a bit dumbfounded. I think everything going on, we were sort of wondering, just where we were going to finish up, because we weren't told anything. And anyway, we eventually got onto the Sydney waterfront there, and they locked the gates behind us so you couldn't go out again. And straight onto the boat, so I mean we didn't have much choice.
What was it like on the Aquitania? Were you first class?
I don't think so. I think their first class was a bit higher up than what we were. We were down below, and we had I remember I was on the top bunk and you couldn't even sit up. And the only thing about it was there was an air vent right near my head. And there was a bit of air coming through. But we had all our kit bags and stuff in the passageway between the bunks, and you had to crawl over all this sort of stuff. And then every now and again they used to put on an emergency, and you had to tear up. You had a certain area where you had to sort of go to, and trying to get up there. And I think we were going up about four different sort of to get up on top deck. But yeah, it was pretty hairy.
Did you take the emergencies seriously? Were you afraid of submarines?
I don't know whether we realised it. I used to be more intrigued with the flying fish and all these sort of things, just watching the boat and the water and things like that. And the escort used to be fascinating. They used to sort of come around in line of a night time, and through the day they'd be sort of cutting backwards and forwards and around about, and you could see other warships in the distance, you know, on the horizon and that sort of thing. And that part was fascinating. It was all new. And yeah, and till we eventually got to Moresby, and because the Aquitania had to stop out in the harbour, it couldn't get in, and I went in on the Swan, and a lot of others went in on the lifeboats and that. They were towing them in and things like that. I can always remember when we got on the Swan, it was really, really hot, and they gave us some real cold water to drink, and that was really good. And anyway, they took us in, and I can remember we got into the wharf, and lo and behold, here's a transport, and we had to clamber with all our gear up over this transport and onto the wharf. And that was, I thought, was a...
Was there a sense of being in a foreign country? Was this new and exciting?
Probably exciting, and probably was it was new and interesting because of the natives and that sort of thing, and the smells.
What sort of smells?
Oh, yeah, sweaty ones.
And you sweated your way up to the 7 Mile, is that what happened?
Yeah, I can all remember going around marching out, and then all these different smells, and the natives were out on the water with a fire going on their little boats, and I suppose they were cooking something, and there was all sorts of smells and that. And I can already remember Sam Templeton telling us not to drink our water, and you had to hang on to the water, you're not to drink it. Eventually we got out. I can remember we got out to the 7 Mile Train, and there was somebody there made up billies of tea, and it was dark, and I remember drinking and then got awful sick and vomited everywhere. Just the heat, I think.
What about the mosquitoes?
Yeah, they're friendly. Yeah, they like a bit of flesh. Yes, we didn't have any tents, anything. We were just under the gum trees. I can remember, I don't know where we got it from, but for the early part, we had a 44-gallon drum, and a tanker came out and filled it up with water. And we had a bath in that, and everybody jumped in one after another, jumping up and down in this same water. And I don't know what it was like for the last bloke, but it might have been a bit thick by then.
Was there any fun in those early days?
Oh yes, we had a bit of fun. I remember they issued us a bottle of beer, and we were trying to keep this bottle of beer cool, which was an impossibility. And I can remember there was another chap and we drank ours about 3 o'clock in the morning, just about the coolest part of the day. But yeah, I can always remember what is now Jackson's Airport up there was just a kunai, flat kunai with a bit of a runway up the middle of it. You know, there was nothing there at all.
What about preparations for defence? What sort of work did you do?
What sort of work did we do? Mainly unloading boats. We didn't do any training. Didn't do any training at all for the initial, probably a few weeks. And then there was, they took Moresby over, and we were in Moresby, and they were flogging off a bit of their stuff in there and that sort of thing, and then they were all getting dysentery. And fortunately, I only got a very slight touch of it, and I managed to get some Horlicks powdered milk, and I also got a plunger thing that you could mix it. And I cured myself with that. I lived on this stuff for a few days, and I got over I didn't go to hospital or anything. I got over it. And then they decided that I'd make a good bait to for the keep the camp clean on that, and so they sent me into Murray Barracks to a school, and I did a school in there on the Anopheles mosquitoes and all that sort of thing, and I was to get a couple of stripes, which never eventuated. And I came back to the battalion, and I was a Hygiene man there. I had a sort of organised digging the holes and burning all the tins and all this sort of stuff, and keeping clean. They kept their tents clean and all this sort of thing. So I did that for quite a while.
Did the mosquito threat ever lessen, or was it as bad at the end as it was at the beginning?
It was always crook. The only time when there was still some around would be in the middle of the day. They'd ease up. But we made bunks in the tents, bush bunks, and set up our mosquito nets, and you'd get in there with a box of matches because all the friendly mosquitoes would come to bed with you. So here you were chasing all the mosquitoes around with a match, burning them.
And the net?
No, fortunately that didn't happen. Then we ran out of socks because we used to shove a sock in a tin and set that alight, and it'd smoulder. And I don't know whether it was the smoke or the sock that smelled the worst. But yeah, we used to burn these socks, but we ran out of socks in the finish.
Now, what about the first bombing raids? Do you remember them well?
Yes, I do. I was in Murray Barracks doing the school, and these bombers came over at night time. It was a moonlight night, and every now and again you got the plane against the moon. You could just see them cruising around. You could hear them, and you just see this plane. And then they started dropping a bomb or two here and there. They weren't in a hurry. And they dropped some in Moresby and hit a few places, and then they went off. Yeah, I remember that was the first one. And it created a panic. And I can remember all these blokes were going for the bush, and they were singing that and stop running away, you know, stop going to the bush. But anyway, they all went, and eventually, after that, a few days after that, they started strafing. The Japs come in strafing and that, and we shifted out the bush then. We didn't stop in Murray Barracks. They evacuated us out. We went out the bush where it was a bit safer. And we finished our school and went back to the battalion.
Where were you when the McDewey was bombed?
Well, I've got a soft spot for the old McDewey. I was with a group that we were on the night before it was bombed. We were unloading it the night before, and we got off about 8 o'clock the next morning, and it was bombed just after we got off. And it headed off out into the harbour, and they came back the next day and finished it off.
All the time that you were at Moresby, you must have seen the Owen Stanleys behind you. What sort of feelings did you have about the thought that you would have to cross them?
Yeah, well, I was... When I had the dengue fever, I went up into the convalescent depot of Koi Taki, and I was there for 2 months, and we used to go out into the jungle chasing butterflies and things like this, you know, and it gave us a pretty good idea what the conditions were like, because up around Koi Taki, it's not jungle, but it's getting a bit that way. And we used to also go up there, and the rubber plantation was up there, and there was a rubber plantation factory. And the manager of it, he taught the natives to play cricket. And we used to go up from the convalescent depot and play cricket. We challenged them, and they used to belt us. But I only knew one way was fast or faster, and they used to swing the bat, and they'd hit them way out into the rubber trees, and we couldn't beat them. But it gave us an idea of what the jungle was like, and that sort of thing, especially chasing butterflies, and that. You used to get out into the bush a bit and that sort of thing, you know. And yeah, it gave us an idea, and often wondered. And then when I left the convalescent depot, I went up to the 38th Training Battalion that they had there before you went back to the unit, and that was out in pretty thick stuff, you know.
And then you were equipped and sent up the track to join the other groups, is that right?
Yeah, I went back, and as I said before, I was made a battalion, and I was with them, and then eventually B Company had gone, and then eventually they decided to send the whole unit. So we packed up and away we went.
Okay, you packed up. What did you carry?
What did I carry? Oh, I carried a rifle and some ammunition and a pack, and odd times a machine gun, and that was about it. I found that hard enough, getting up the hills and down. I always found going down the hills harder than going up. Get sore shins and that sort of thing. I think one of the hardest days I had was getting up to Owa's Corner, and that night we camped there, and my shins and my feet and my legs, they didn't belong to me. And then the next morning I was looking down on the Goldie River down the bottom, I think, and then I could see this great hill looking at us, and I thought, oh no. So anyway, I think that was the awakening, that was.
Okay, that was the awakening. Well, what about the whole experience? How did you feel by the time you got to Efogi?
Well, I really think you were just sort of in a state of shock, and you just went mechanically. You sort of one foot after the other if you didn't slide back down the hill. But yeah, I think it was pretty much a sort of you know. You sort of followed the other bloke in front of you.
Did the other bloke ever give up? Did anyone ever give up?
Not to my knowledge, no. I thought I did it in the finish. I've often thought of it. I think I coped with it pretty well. And I did get a bit of a ulcer here on my shoulder at one stage from rubbing on the pack, but it wasn't too bad. And every night at the end of the day, if it was possible to get into a river or a stream or something and have a wash and that sort of thing. And no, I kept up pretty well, I thought.
Was it sweat during the day and cold at night?
Oh, cold, freezing at night time, yeah. You didn't have any tents or anything much, you know. Didn't have a chance to put anything up, or you didn't have them to put up, you know. And yes, it was pretty cold, and if it rained and that sort of thing, it didn't help. But yeah, it was pretty hot, and I found one of the most exhausting things is when you hit an open part with kunai grass, and it'd be really hot, and you get in the kunai grass, and oh boy, it was like an oven, and no breeze, no nothing, and hot, really hot. And I think you're a little bit better off back out on the track in the actual jungle itself, because the overhead sort of, it was shady anyway. You're out of the sun, and the sun was, you know, could be quite hot.
Did you ever have time to look at the jungle and wonder about it?
Not really, I don't think. I think I was too busy just coping with it. The thing that amazed me a bit was the lack of tropical fruit and tropical stuff. You come across a bit here and there, but nothing much at all. You'd never live off it, you know.
What about your supplies? Did you have meals that were adequate?
At times we had enough just to keep you going. I can remember I had some ration, a tin of ration, emergency rations, and it had some chocolate and some dried fruit stuff in it and things like that. And but you weren't quite aware of holding on to that as it was an emergency, and the lack of food and the decent feed and that, I was a bit inclined to eat some of this, which I shouldn't have actually, because it is virtually an emergency ration. And I wasn't in an emergency situation at that time. But, you know, you sort of do these sort of things. But no, we didn't get much, no. And I can remember quite times somebody'd have a tin of bullet beer, be 3, 4, 5 of us whack it up between us, and that'd be it. And I can remember one other time we didn't have any food. There was 3 of us, and we were going through this village, old village. There was nobody there, and we found a sort of a tomato plant. It had these little cherry tomatoes on it, and we had a feed of cherry tomatoes, and that's all we had. Every time I see these little cherry tomatoes, that brings back the memory of these that we had. And it was quite something to have.
And the mandarin trees, were they there in the villages?
Yeah, yes, they were. They had their market gardens, the vegetable garden. We used to go and dig up taro and stuff like this, and sweet potatoes and that. Not that I liked them, but you had to eat something. And yes. I remember at one stage the cooks, a couple of boats turned cooks, and they had a big iron thing, big iron dish, and they cooked up a stew and they chucked everything in. And at least it was hot.
Did you feel welcome as you went through the villages?
From my memory, the villages were all deserted.
Okay.
We met a few on the track, walking, and the thing that used to really get us is how far to the next village, and you get all sorts of answers. 2 hours, 5 hours. Oh, around the bend.
One more hill.
You still do.
I guess you still do it. Yeah.
What about sleeping? Did you sleep much?
No, I didn't. It was too cold, too wet. You were wet, you were tired. I think you got overtired, and I think you were suffering with a few blistered feet. You were suffering with sore muscles and all this sort of thing. You finished up, you were better up moving because you just stiffened up that much from the cold and trying to sleep and this sort of thing. And I can't remember we even had a blanket. I don't think we even had a blanket. I didn't had a ground sheet. I spent many hours sitting on my tin hat with a ground sheet over my head.
What were you thinking about?
Home.
Were there many ways of getting letters at all?
Parcels and letters. I got an odd few letters, not many. I got one parcel, I think. And the letters I got, you couldn't, I tried to answer them. I used to turn the envelopes inside out and write on the inside and send them back. And I sent several of them home. And I know my younger brother, he's been a keen collector of memorabilia and that sort of stuff, and he often wondered what happened to them, but I guess they got chucked out. There was one thing he would have liked to have got hold of those letters, but it wasn't to be. But no, it always amazes me how anybody had a diary. I can't understand how they kept them. You see different ones that had diaries and that. I guess depending on what they were doing and the situation they were in, might have been able to have a diary and write it up and keep it dry or whatever, because I'm certainly I wouldn't have.
Who were your mates on the track?
Who was what?
Who were your mates? Did you have
Mates?
any particular mates on the track?
Oh, I had 4 or 5 real good mates. And matter of fact, I think I wrote them on one of those lists there. Do you mind if I just go through them? Albert Baruta was a mate of mine that was, he and I both joined at Bialaba. Ray Knights. Now, Ray was the corporal of our section, and he was a little bloke, and he and I got on really well. But we were down at Bootless Bay, and Ray got a tropical ulcer on his penis, and he used to have to go down to the beach every day and sit in the water, and we used to give him hell. And Ray was wounded and cut off with a group, and eventually the Japs caught up to them and they were all killed. Jack Hocking was another one. He was in B Company. He was a little fella that hated the army, couldn't stand it, couldn't stand officers. and at one stage he had been threatened to be court-martialed out in the middle of the jungle. But anyway, he's gone. And another fella, Charlie Miller. Now Charlie, he was a bit of a runner, and Charlie, they had a sports meeting in Moresby there at one time, and Colonel Honner got about a 50-yard start. Charlie tried to catch him but ran second. Strangely enough, before he died, he wrote a book, Charlie's book. And another thing that I found out, his father and my father, when they were young, worked for Charlie's grandfather. Another mate of mine was Reg Edgell, who was also a hairdresser. And Reg was wounded at Gona, I think, and he had his elbow all busted up. But Reg was a quite sort of a bloke, but he was a mate of mine. And another fellow was Albert Power. Now, when we were leaving Darwin, Albert went and got himself married the day before. And I can always remember we were sitting down at the Bacchus Marsh railway station waiting for the train, and we were sitting with Albert and trying to console him because his wife's sitting up in the pub in Bacchus Marsh, and we were saying to him, why don't you go up and say her later? And he wouldn't go. So the way we went, and Albert was killed down at Huggins Road on the last patrol we did. He was killed down there. He never got back to see his wife.
When you were on the track heading towards Kokoda, were you afraid of the Japanese at many points?
No. We hadn't heard any news, and as far as I'm concerned, we just kept walking, and we had a point to head for, we didn't know where we were going to stop. And of course it was made for us because we got to Deneki and they were in Kokoda. So I mean to say that was the stopping point. And I can already remember the day we got to Deneki and I ran into Doc Shearer. And he had 3 or 4 badly wounded fellas there. And I said, what are you going to do, Doc? And he said, we haven't got the facilities to do anything for them. And, you know, there was no way of getting them out then, and there was no way of treating them. But they were that badly hurt, you know, and they all died.
How far down the track did you get?
I only got to Deneki. That's as far as I got. The only furthest I got after that was the day that they retook Kokoda. I went down the main track and we got chased back. We ran into a patrol of Japs coming up to Deneki and we lost Captain Dean down there. And we captured a machine gun and some rifles and some ammunition. And but then the Japs followed us back up to Deneki and they attacked us there. And strangely enough, at that stage, Major Cameron was in charge of us, and I was the battalion runner. And that was a pretty hairy job because you had these snipers up the trees and they were having a bit of a ping at you all the time. But anyway, they missed. But yeah, it was a bit hairy. And I used to use the natives at night time. They seemed to know their way around a lot better in the dark than I did. So I used to use them for night time, going around the different fronts to take a message or to see how they were going, bring a message back, something like that. That didn't last long because we had to get out of Deneki and then we moved back down to the next village, which I can't remember what it would have been. But I can always remember there was a village and a house, a native hut there, and all the officers were up inside and we were underneath. And we were all wet, cold, hungry, everything. And here I was trying to dry off some clothes for one of the officers up there with a bit of a blackfellas fire, you know, underneath the hut, which was practically hopeless. I think he had to put his wet clothes on again the next day. I think at that stage I probably gave myself the sack of Batman.
And where were you during the Battle of the Sioux River?
I got to Esharova with the mob. And I was there from when it started till we evacuated.
After all the battles of the area, were the natives of great assistance?
Yeah, they were great assistance in so far as bringing up the supplies and taking out the wounded and this sort of thing. I had one experience. I had the job of taking one lot of natives through to the front with supplies. Each native carried about 50 pounds and they'd all be stretched out along the line, and I used to come up at the rear, but the time we got to the front with whatever supplies we had, quite a few of them had disappeared. And the whole point about it was, although we were attempting to feed the troops, you also had to feed your carriers. And I wanted to say it wasn't sufficient to do both. And the natives they were getting hungry the same as us, and they were working hard. They were taking supplies through and bringing out stretchers. I mean to say they earned whatever they got.
Were you able to retreat on your own energy, or did the natives help you?
No, I did it on my own. There was plenty of others that needed the natives to help them. And a lot of the fellas got out on their own. Yeah.
But you weren't well, were you?
No, I had scrub typhus and it was laying me low, but I didn't want to leave the unit, but I didn't know how I was going to go. But eventually, when we got back to Minari, I left the day before. They had the Colonel Honours assembly, and I walked back from Minari to Ours Corner. I had to get a jeep, came up to pick us up. And when I got up to Ours Corner, the jeep was just about up to its fetlocks in mud. And there was other couple of boats there. So we all three of us piled in the back. We take off, and the mud was that thick that we had to get out and push the thing. And eventually we got it out after pushing and carrying on for quite a while, and we got it out of the mud and got us back to hospital. And I can already remember I got to the hospital, I was just covered in mud. And I can always remember saying, "Good God, look at this." And they just stripped you off. Nothing. Took everything. When I left hospital, I had nothing. I went back to the unit, and a pair of slippers that I found somewhere, and a shirt and a pair of shorts. Had nothing.
Were the Salvation Army or the Red Cross there?
They were on the track, yeah. Yeah, you get a cup of tea or something and a biscuit. And it was good. Yeah, they were there.
Now, you had earned a rest. Did you have one?
No. I didn't have a rest until I got to hospital.
After hospital, you went to Homburn Buff. Is that right?
Yes, I went back to the unit up on Homburn Buff, and we used to go down to the Loki River for a wash, and down the pretty steep hill, and then you had a wash and you had to crawl all the way back up again. And I can always remember I used to get about halfway and I'd had it. And eventually you had to get up. There's no good stopping there, so eventually you'd get up there. But then we evacuated Homburn Bluff. Well, I still didn't have any clothes or anything. And I can always remember we marched from Homburn Bluff early in the morning while it was cool, and I forget where we headed for, but I got about halfway there. I couldn't go any further. I was still crook. The truck came along, and which was pretty rare, and I got a ride up to where we were, and when I got there they had the tents up and everything, thank God. So. But I didn't have a mosquito net.
And they hadn't changed their habits?
And the mosquitoes were still just as friendly as ever. And yeah, it was one of those trips. And, but I must have got some clothes somewhere, because it wasn't long after that we flew over to Gona.
After your stay in hospital and you learnt that you were going back over to the beaches, how well were you? How well recovered were you?
Well, I'd been in hospital and got back to the unit, and I still wasn't well, and it took a long time to get over it. But I was there, I was with the unit, and you're sent there, you've got probably a job to do, so go and do it.
Did the countryside and the experience seem much different on the beachheads as opposed to the track?
Yeah, it's swampy, wet, malarial country. Yeah, and when it rained, it all just, at one stage there, we were in water more or less up to our knees for quite a while. Couldn't get out of it. The only way you could sleep was hang on to a tree. And I can always remember my mum gave me a wristwatch before I left, and it had a leather band on it, and the leather band rotted. And this particular night it was wet and that, and in the morning the watch was gone. It had fallen off. And I'm standing there and I thought, oh, where's it got to? Anyway, I'm looking around. There's a little bit of the leather band sticking up out of the water. So I retrieved my watch. But then when I had a look at it, the water had infiltrated onto the face of the watch. And I thought, oh, this is going to ruin it. So anyway, I turned around and I got some rifle oil and stuck some of that in it. And the watch kept going.
Good.
On the way home on the Katoomba hospital ship, I was sleeping. I went and had a sleep. I put some things on the little table next to the bed. One was the watch. Somebody pinched it.
Oh.
When I woke up, it was gone.
And you were discharged in 1943?
I was discharged in 1945.
Oh. That was a very long war.
1945. I finished up in the Ballarat Convalescent Depot twice. I finished up in Heidelberg once. I was in Greenslopes once. I was in Bathurst once. I was in Toowoomba Convalescent Depot up there. And when I was up there, they sent me back down to Sydney on the Centaur, which was torpedoed just after we got off it on the way back.
On looking back over the whole experience, is there anything that you'd really like to tell future generations?
I think that what we didn't do and what is occurring now, I think is good, that the younger ones are being taught what went on, because it's going to be in time, it's going to be history like Gallipoli is. I think it's got a long way to go yet, as I presume Kokoda and to Brook and all these places, well, Millen Bay, for instance, will all be history in time. And I think the younger ones have got to keep it going so that their children will still have it there for them to know about, because with us, we can only sort of tell it, and it can be passed on to a certain degree because not many of us left to the younger ones, and I think that's pretty vital, and I think they've got to appreciate what a country they've got.
Thank you very much.